We were a group of 5, drawn together by a mix of curiosity and sheer boredom. Kevin, the self-proclaimed leader, always had an insatiable thirst for urban legends. Sarah, his girlfriend, tagged along more out of love than interest. Dave, cool and collected, handled most situations with a smirk. Then there was Laura, her eyes constantly darting around, soaking in every creak and shadow. Me, I was just along for the ride, the skeptic in the group. Or maybe I was just too stubborn to admit fear. The rumors had circulated for years, an abandoned subway station deep beneath the city where trains with no passengers and no operators still ran. Most dismissed it as a myth, a tale exaggerated to spook teenagers into avoiding the area. But here we were, standing at the rusted gates of the old Westmore Street entrance, ready to turn myth into memory. Kevin pushed the gate, and it swung open with a loud screech that echoed down the corridor. "See," he said, flashing a grin, "nothing to it." We descended into the belly of the city, our footsteps clattering against the metal stairs. Even with our flashlights cutting through the dark, the shadows seemed to shift and dance, as though they were alive. The air was cold and damp. Each of us carried the scent of rust and mildew from the walls. Laura, always inches from Sarah's side, spoke up, her voice barely concealing a tremor. "We should have brought warmer clothes. It's freezing down here." "Feels like an icebox," Dave agreed, rubbing his arms. "Guess ghosts enjoy the cold." Reaching the platform, we paused, taking in the sight. It was as if time had stopped. Advertisements from decades past clung to the walls, their colors faded, their promises irrelevant. Benches stood untouched by anything but thick layers of dust and the occasional hint of a rat's visit. Kevin paced ahead, his flashlight beam scattering rats that had dared venture too close. "Quiet," he said, though there was nothing but the drip of water and our uneven breaths. "What time do these ghost trains arrive?" I asked, trying to lighten the mood, though secretly I felt relief that there hadn't yet been a sign of any phantom locomotives. "Some say midnight," Kevin replied, checking the time on his phone, which offered us no service down here. "We've got 20 more minutes, enough time to decide if we should stay or turn back." Sarah shushed him suddenly, holding up her hand. "Did you hear that?" We froze, every ear straining. At first, there was nothing but silence, oppressive and full. Then, faintly, came a sound, a distant hum, low and persistent, like an engine deep beneath the earth. "It's the pipes," I suggested, but the sound didn't fade. If anything, it grew louder, carrying an unsettling rhythm that suggested movement, life. Laura gripped my arm, her nails biting into skin. "That's not the pipes," she murmured, eyes wide. The humming intensified, accompanied now by a low screech, metal on metal. The platform shook, dust rising from the floor as though shaken by invisible hands. Kevin's eyes brightened with a mix of fear and excitement. "It's coming," he said, almost breathless with anticipation. "A train's coming." Dave shook his head. "No way, tracks down here have been dead for years." But belief didn't matter. The station felt alive, the energy prickling the skin, a thrumming pulse across the planks of wood and concrete. Without realizing, we backed away from the edge, forming a tight knot of nervous energy. The screeching intensified, resolving into the unmistakable roar of an approaching train. Sarah grabbed Kevin's hand, squeezing it like a lifeline. What if it's true? Kevin hesitated, the fight between skepticism and hope playing out across his face. None of us had an answer. We stood there, hearts pounding, breath held, waiting for reality to bend or hold. The platform lay buried beneath the city, a secret known only to a few who dared to descend its creaking steps. The Subway 13 station was never marked on any map. Those who found it did so by accident or by the said warnings of the mad who had escaped its grasp. But the stories were always the same. Once you entered, the only way out was on a train that never left. A pale, flickering light cast long shadows as Harold clutched the rusty railing, each step deeper echoing with the sound of his worn shoes. It was as if the air down here was thicker, laden with the musty scent of time forgotten. Harold had heard the stories, but desperation drove him to explore the unfathomable. The platform was eerily silent, except for the distant clatter of tracks that seemed to come from nowhere. A chilled wind swept through, rustling the old newspaper fragments scattered across the ground. It was colder than it should be, given the season. He peered down the darkened tunnel, expecting nothing. But then, in the distance, two headlights appeared, growing larger yet casting no light around them. The ghost train approached, its body translucent, shimmering as though carved from the midnight fog itself. It ground to a halt, doors sliding open with a sigh, beckoning him in. Harold hesitated before stepping inside. The carriage was empty, save for rows of empty seats lined with worn velvet. He sat near a window, though there was nothing to see beyond the glass but shadows that danced like phantoms. A crumpled piece of paper lay on the seat beside him. Unfolding it, Harold read the faded script, "Respect the silence, or it will find you." The words sent a shiver down his spine, and he glanced around, half expecting some entity to appear. As the train started moving, it was noiseless. The outside world was a blur, the windows offering no hint of their destination. Harold noticed the lights above him grew dimmer, their buzzing more pronounced, until it was a hum inside his skull. The train seemed endless, the minutes stretching into eternity. Harold's thoughts drifted to Sarah, his daughter, waiting above ground. He gripped the paper tighter. She would be wondering where he had gone, but Harold knew he couldn't return until he understood this place. New words appeared on the paper, as if written by an invisible hand. "Do not open the doors between stops." Harold's eyes widened, his heart pounding with a disquiet he couldn't shake off. He wondered what lay beyond those doors before realizing he didn't want to know. The train slowed, not at a station, but just short of a tunnel engulfed in pure darkness. The doors yawned open, the silence inside no longer comforting but tense, expectant. Something moved outside shapes that didn't belong, pressing close, clawing at the edge of his vision. Harold's breath quickened. The rules began to unravel, each more bizarre than the last, etched into his mind. Do not touch the windows, for it invites them inside. He pulled back his hand as if burned, the unseen presence outside growing stronger, more insistent. The train jerked forward, as if wrenching itself free from invisible chains. The environment grew hostile, the air turning sour, burning his lungs with each breath. The lights began to flicker, the carriage swaying as though caught in a tempest. Shadows writhed, and he realized they weren't mere tricks of the light, but echoes of those who had failed to follow the rules. Panic swelled inside him, a tide he could not control. It was more than just the isolation. The station itself seemed alive, aware, feeding off the fear it conjured. Harold clung to the seat, the remnants of his hope dwindling. Another stop, the train pausing again. This time, the doors didn't open. Instead, the lights went out, plunging him into utter darkness. Harold swallowed his scream, the silence oppressive, a living thing that stretched its fingers toward him. Minutes passed like hours. When the lights returned, a final rule stood stark on the paper: only leave when the train invites you. The train slowed once more, a station materializing outside, a mirror image of Subway 13, yet desolate, draped in a thick mist. The doors parted, and Harold knew, as if the train itself said an invitation to him. He stood, legs unsteady, crossing the threshold onto the platform. The air felt different, lighter, as though welcoming him into a realm all its own. There was no going back, but as Harold climbed the steps to the surface, he understood the rules. The sounds would follow him, anchored now in his bones, the haunting melody of Subway 13. And above ground, in the world of the living, he knew he would never find silence again. Alina had always been fascinated by urban legends, and the tale of the ghost trains was too enticing to resist. This particular urban myth spoke of an abandoned subway station buried beneath the city, where ghostly trains arrived each night, only to vanish moments later. Curiosity got the better of her. Armed with a flashlight and a map she had found online, Alina set out one evening to find the hidden entrance. Streets turned into alleys, alleys turned into overgrown paths, until she finally arrived at a rusting gate. The city had long forgotten this place. She slipped through, descending a narrow staircase into the depths below. The station was a remnant of another era. Architectural flourishes and fading advertisements clung to the walls, echoes of a time long past. A sense of unease settled over Alina, but her curiosity pushed her forward. She checked her watch, just a few minutes until midnight, the witching hour for the myth. Alina leaned against a pillar, heart pounding. The air was deathly still, but as her watch ticked 12, an ethereal light began to wash over the tracks. A train, translucent and eerie, materialized as if phasing into existence from another realm. Keeping her breathing steady, Alina crept closer. This was it. The ghost train of legend, its windows offering glimpses of shadowy figures that seemed oblivious to their spectral state. She hesitated, the barrier between rage and folly growing ever thinner. Her foot slipped, sending a small rock skittering onto the tracks. Instantly, heads turned within the carriages. The figures inside, once indifferent, now stared directly at her. Panic surged through Alina. Suddenly, the train doors opened with a hiss that echoed hauntingly throughout the station. A voice, calm and ancient, suddenly filled the air. "Why do you seek the dead when the living still call to you?" it questioned, the sound coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Alina froze, her mind racing. She thought of the stories. Those who boarded the train never returned. Yet here was an opportunity to uncover a truth hidden for decades. "I want to understand," she replied, her voice wavering but determined. "I want to know why the rules exist." Silence stretched out, heavy and oppressive. Then, a figure stepped off the train, a conductor dressed in an old-fashioned uniform, his face partially hidden in shadow. "The rules are not to protect the dead from the living," he explained, voice echoing in the cavernous space, "but to protect the living from their own regret." The conductor extended a hand, palm upturned. "Once you board, your past life ceases to matter, only your regrets travel with you. Are you willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of curiosity?" Alina hesitated. The weight of the offer was almost too much to bear. Behind the conductor, the figures in the windows watched, their eyes filled with silent, unspeakable tales of loss and longing. "And if I leave?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "You'll carry the memory of this encounter forever," the conductor replied. "But you'll remain among the living, with both hope and pain intact. The choice, as always, is yours to make." The station returned to silence. The conductor waited patiently, the offer hanging in the musty air like a storm cloud. Alina's heart ached with indecision, but a small voice in her head, a voice that still believed in the pulse of life above ground, spoke louder. "I choose life," she said finally, stepping back slowly from the edge of the platform. The conductor nodded, an almost imperceptible gesture of understanding, and with a flick of his hand, the train dissolved into nothingness. The ghostly light vanished, leaving Alina standing alone in the dim, forgotten station. As she turned to leave, the words of the conductor lingered, echoing in the chamber of her mind. She had come seeking one kind of truth, but had found another. In that darkened station, she had glimpsed a path she would never take, a life not meant for her. Emerging into the night, Alina took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her choice. The city around her buzzed with the hum of a world that was hers to live in, flawed, imperfect, but real. And somewhere beneath it all, the ghost trains would continue their spectral journeys, carrying their passengers of regret, waiting for the next seeker driven by curiosity and the haunting call of stories waiting to be told. But for Alina, the subway held no eternal ride, and that was the deepest relief she could ever embrace.